episode number 224 with Alexander Fitzgerald. Welcome to the Heads Up Poker Podcast. This is Steve Barton.
This is Mike Snyderman.
Yes, sir. Alex Fitzgerald.
Dragged into hell, kicking and screaming.
How are you, my friend?
Oh, pretty good. Pretty good.
Good. Well, we got Alex on again.
Okay.
Last time he was on.
What is this cocksucker selling? It's like seasons, isn't it?
He's got a free gift, actually.
Okay.
At the end of the show. Yeah, it's a free 3-hour training pack. I have not seen this one, so I'm super excited.
Okay.
But, yeah, we'll see. But yeah.
So how was your first month? Did you already do your marathon? I'm sorry, Steve. I don't.
No, I have it coming up when March 8th. So
okay.
Wow, that's in about a month. Okay. It's coming up.
I think you were bumping up in mileage as you went along. Your last time I spoke to you, you did 14 miles? Is that?
I did 16, and maybe not the last time we talked, but the furthest I've gone now is 16, and that was a bitch. I just did a race. I did a 10K race, which is only 6.2, but I increased my time by 20 minutes from the last time I did it 8 months ago. So I am getting faster. But yeah, the distance part, man, is just brutal. I've got a 20-mile run coming up, I think, in the next week or so. And I'm pretty nervous. It's no joke. It is no joke.
You're not that nervous. I'm sure you're still taking action on your bet, right? Have you got any action? Oh, okay.
No, I haven't. Nobody
bets against Bourdain. Not even listen to the show, for God's sakes.
Maybe I'm just a little, but I don't know. Under 5 hours, I mean, anything could happen. But we'll see.
From checking out your Twitter, I saw you had a nice score.
Oh yes, I did. The Super Bowl. That was the most fun game I've ever watched in my life. I was at an interesting point in that football tournament. So I was at a point where the Super Bowl is worth 10 points, and you got to pick KC minus 1.5, or you got to pick San Francisco plus 1.5. And so talking with my brother, I was on the phone with Mark Alioto for an hour yesterday, and or on Sunday. And because if I took third, I was either going to get third or eighth, depending on the point value and the movement, what everyone picked, Third place was worth 6,530, so 6,530. And eighth was worth 1,600.
Okay.
So I was asking Mark, I'm like, do I, put some money on San Francisco and, risk my, lower my upside, but up my, my floor, so put, I could essentially bet it to even, you know what I mean? So that no matter what happens in the game, I win $4,000.
You're free rolling.
Yeah, exactly. And Mark was like, yeah, you got to put some money on the other side. He's like, take your payday, just take the money. And he's like, I'm in a similar situation because he put 300 on San Francisco as a future to win the Super Bowl. And that paid 10K come Super Bowl Sunday, right? And he's like, I put 3,500 on Kansas City because I got to get paid something, And he's like, and he saw this one is just a straight up coin flip. He's like, after all the analytics and everything, just flip a coin. It's either heads or tails. And to flip a coin on having nothing on one side and so much on the other, you got to spread it out. So
how much should you lay off on the 49ers there?
I was going to use some do Bovada, but I only had $250 on there. My buddy, I'm like, I'm not going to use this $250 a couple weeks ago. My buddy made a bunch of futures bets and stuff. He paid me cash to do it. Of course, none of them hit. So I didn't have anything on there. And I was talking to Mark, and he's like, you can throw some Bitcoin on there. And I'm like, okay, it's already noon. The game starts at 3:30, and I've got all my Bitcoin on a ledger, which I'll have to transfer over to Coinbase, which I'll have to transfer over to Bovada. And any of those transactions can take anywhere from 15 minutes to 3 hours, depending on how long the traffic is going. I'm like, I can't do this. So I drove up to my buddy's place in Santa Barbara, and we watched the Super Bowl at a cigar shop there. And the guy's girlfriend runs, her dad runs a bookie. So I was able to, I pulled out all the cash I could in the ATM, which was $1,000. And I had a couple other dollars, and I gave her $11.50 to win $1,000 on San Francisco, like 10 minutes before the game started. It was kind of funny too, because when I was handing her over $1,000, she's all right, cool. Well, good luck on your bet with San Francisco. I'm all, actually, this is going to sound pretty jacked up, but I'm going to be rooting for Kansas City the whole time.
Right.
She's like, what? Why did you just hand me $1,000? So I probably would have handed you more if I could, but the ATM would have only given me $1,000. So that was it. It felt kind of strange. I did feel kind of like a baller though, betting $1,000 and then rooting for the other side. I've never had, because the swing, it put me at 5,380 if Kansas City won, and 2,600 if San Francisco won. So I had like $3,000 on this game. I've never had that much money in a sports bet before. I think the most I bet is like $200 on the Super Bowl, and I really don't have any idea what I'm doing, so I just figure I'm doing this for fun. But this one, it was like, wow. This is, I mean, every play, I didn't miss a single play. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, you were so involved in the game. I think this may be how you feel like when you're throwing dice or something. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, it's it's 3rd and 6. Oh, dang, they almost had an extra half a yard. Like, it's just so, oh man, there was no feeling like it. It was fun.
Spending your time watching a sporting event where you didn't give a shit who won, that sounds like fun to me, Steve.
Yeah, it was cool though. It was cool. But
what else?
My brother got first in that tournament. I don't remember if and he pulled it off last week of the playoffs after the first game. After that, he had so many points, no one could catch him. So the kid did quite well. Won
Barton
$10,000.
boys are just killing it.
Won $10,000. Yeah, that was a fun tournament.
Your brother shouldn't he be entering like 20 of these, like hustling around and seeing every league he can get into?
Yeah, I kind of want to do an episode with him and Mark, and see if Mark can see something into this. How we can improve it. I mean, 1st and 3rd is pretty fucking good, but
sure.
Mark has the mind where he could see something that the two of us are not, and make it even better. Or maybe he knows where more of these exist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was it? I had something to talk about.
How about you? How you been?
Last month was good with poker. Finally had one of those. I mean, right as I was near the edge, broke, calling my brother saying, if I don't have a good weekend, I need you to pay my rent. Pretty much.
Yeah.
As bad as it gets. And of course, I have like a 25K upswing between the last week or two of December and January. So
good for you.
Keeps me alive temporarily.
On.
Anyways, we'll see how things go from here.
Have you lowered your hours per week a little bit?
Yeah, I still played a lot of hours last month. I want to say I played like 240 or something like that.
What would you be able to just do 200? I mean, even 200 is a lot, dude. That's like 50 hours a week.
No.
Yeah.
Unlikely. I mean, I guess if I was running good, I could like take the last. That's kind of what I did. I had a good run here, so I didn't play Sunday, didn't play yesterday, and I'm not going to play today.
Okay, good. You're taking a break.
But then the days I will play, Thursday I'll show up at 9 in the morning and possibly stay till whenever. Hopefully I'll stop at 3, take an hour in my car, then go out. So that's kind of it. It feels still like I have plenty of leisure time. It feels like. I have plenty of time when I'm sitting watching a movie or walking on the beach
Okay.
I haven't. Actually, this kind of comes to that, Steve. One of my other things I want to do this year is I used to read like a lot.
Yeah.
50, 60. I think one year I might have even read 100 books a year. I can't remember.
Wow. That's impressive.
But like the last couple of years is like 4 or 5. Who knows why that is? You get older, you're like, why am I reading this? This is just entertainment. I'm not sure. But this year I told myself I'm reading 48.
48 books?
48 books. That isn't really that many for a month.
Now, why did you pick the number 48 and not?
4 month.
Oh, okay.
There's 12
All right.
months.
I knew there had to be some kind of logic behind it. I was like, why did he pick 50?
Unfortunately,
I mean that
Steve,
sounds incredible. That's yeah.
The only way you can count that high, Steve, is if you had 8 hands. So I mean, you'll have to just take my word for it.
Okay. Yeah, I was already counting through my toes, and I was like, I just don't have enough here.
We'll see. I already fell short. 3 books in the first month. I thought I'd share what they are, not to be sir. One of them I thought you'd find pretty interesting.
Okay.
I read Helter Skelter, the Manson murders, which is like considered like the true crime classic of classics.
Interesting.
Listen by the guy who prosecuted him. So I really didn't know too much about that. That was pretty interesting. I like cult-like activity too, of course.
Mm-hmm. Fits in naturally.
I feel if I was a little more motivated, Steve, not only would I be a World Series of Poker champion, I think I'd also have a nice cult going. To be honest with you. Then I read the book Obsession by John Douglas, who is the guy who he interviewed and studied Manson quite a bit.
Okay.
Like, he was an FBI profiler, and this actually wasn't about Manson. It's about other stuff. It's about I don't know. The FBI is like, do you know there's like 7 different kinds of rapists? Like when they're looking for someone, you might find it interesting. I don't know. It's like the gentleman rapist. I mean, it's just kind of,
Really?
well, the gentleman rapist is just he's going after a woman he really wants to have sex with, but he's trying not to brutalize her. He's trying to have her feel pleasure.
Yeah.
Still,
Okay.
obviously, it's But anyways, he breaks down all there's like different kidnappers and different, all this.
Interesting. I do like those shows on Netflix, and this guy, I think they have like a little series on Netflix about him. He was an FBI profiler that went around. In one of the episodes, he interviewed Manson, and he did like.
Oh yeah, Mindhunter. Yeah,
Mindhunter. Yeah, you've seen it. Okay.
He wrote a book called Mindhunter. I read that too.
Okay. Oh.
And
cool.
in my last book of Murder and Mayhem this month, this one I might even find too. The Last Stone, it's called. About 2 girls were murdered in Washington D.C. back in the 70s, and they had nothing. Every 10 years, the cold case unit would pick it up. No DNA, no physical evidence to hold on. And then some detective, 40 years, that was going back through the files and read this interview of this guy who went in and reported something, but he was a young guy and he was stoned, and some of the details weren't right, so they just ignored it. And this guy went back and talked to this guy, went and looked it up, and this guy was in prison for raping a child.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's the true crime book where you're trying to catch, but it was almost 300 pages of one long how to interrogate, how to get someone to admit guilt. Because basically, if this guy loved talking, but he thought he was smarter than him, and he could keep just telling stories, and they never figure anything out.
Yeah.
But if this guy just said, I want a lawyer, nothing would have ever happened. But he wanted to talk. And at the beginning, it's like, no, I don't know anything about this. And then by the end, it's like, yeah, I kidnapped her, and I got rid of the body, but I didn't do this, that, or that. So there were a lot was uncertain, but they had enough on him where he had to, first degree murder and went to prison. But it was like, I know you say you like to play games. It was kind of the good cop, bad cop, and how you you break someone down.
And what was this one called?
The Last Stone.
The Last Stone.
All the little interrogation, he would, you'd make sure he was there for an hour and had to wait for you.
Yeah.
I don't know, all sorts of stupid little shit, but I get them Anyways, we
cool. Well, that's a good.
We'll see. Good
goal,
goal.
Mikey. But should we bring in Alex?
Sure.
All righty. Take a quick break. Alexander Fitzgerald.
Supersonic speed that I used to run to you. I stretched my arms for miles and miles and wrapped them all around.
Alexander Fitzgerald, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Last time you were on was about this time last year, episode 200.
Was it really that long ago?
Seriously? January 25th is what the timestamp says on mine.
Damn.
So, yeah, just a little bit over a year. How you been? Last time I saw you, we're in New York. You got to see my drunken fireman buddies.
Yeah, I've been good, man. How you been?
I've been good. The football's over, so it's a little bittersweet, but it was a good season. What else have I been doing? Yeah, I guess I'm going to have to shift my focus from sports betting back to poker.
You're going to have to, oh, you're not going to bet the XFL? That's not an interest for you?
I wouldn't even know how to bet that if my life depended on it.
Right. I know. Everybody keeps saying football season isn't over, and it's like, no, it's over. Like, XFL doesn't count.
Yeah. Not interested in watching guys run around an arena.
Right, right.
Oh, right on. Yeah, so you
I have a question.
Go for it.
What the fuck are you doing with your life? No, once again, my research for this, Steve, I did watch the video that Alex sent me. Thank you. But then I look at his Facebook and I get tired after like 30 seconds. If you look in the last 3 months, the guy has been to Versailles and he's been to Camden, New Jersey. And you look equally as happy in both, I'd like to say.
That sentence has never been said in the history of man. This man has been to Camden, New Jersey. No, how did you put it? This man has been to Versailles and Camden, New Jersey. Yes, sir. I've been pretty happy. I got to go to routine here now. I'm pretty happy with my life.
Good.
Can we ask about the lady there? I mean,
Go for it, man. She'll laugh about it. No worries.
You guys have been together for a while now, right? I can't remember your divorce. Is like you've been together for like 3 years, haven't you?
Yeah, a few years, man. Yeah, it's been a little while.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't it time to get a ring on her before she realizes she can do better, or what?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I've kept it going long enough. I should probably get moving. Everybody else hints at that, but yeah, no, just given how happy I am, that logically seems like it'd be coming up. I didn't know that was going to be what you were going to ask.
Well, actually, I want to, of course, all these little adventures you go on, your lady seems to be right next to you.
Yes, sir.
Does she, I'm sure she liked Paris, but does she like that as much as she likes Voodoo Donut, whatever the fuck that is? I look at all your pictures and you always tag them.
Yeah, man, you got to let people know where they are. You don't know what Voodoo Donuts is? Have you never been to Portland?
No, what is it?
Oh, it's amazing, man. You go to this donut shop that's been in Portland since Christ was a corporal, and you go in there and you get like the maple bars with bacon on it and just 100 different little creations. And they got the grunge music real loud and homeless people yelling at you to give the full experience. It's a trip.
Huh.
Yeah, no, it's good times.
Saw you went to the ballet. Whose idea was that?
I bet you can guess that one, but it was it's fun. I'm cultured like that now. No, it was fun to it's fun to check out. It's fun to do different things. That's one of those things about poker. They always say that if you ask 100 poker players why did they do this, they'll all say for the freedom. And then you kind of get to a certain point where you go, well, all I'm doing is working all the time. I'm working every Friday night. I'm working every Saturday. I'm working every Sunday. So I've actually grown an appetite for like, let's do the cheesy stuff, right? Like, let's go to the ballet. I mean, I probably won't be in New York forever. So why not? I want to see what this looks like. And yeah, the Nutcracker was interesting. I'm a little amazed how they can do all of that, but yeah, I did not get as much out of it as my girlfriend got out of it. Yeah.
Later on, you did.
I saw there was looks like there was a battle rap in Staten Island fairly recently.
Yeah, man. I went and saw the Source perform, the guy I battled against. But yeah, I didn't battle. I just haven't had time. It's been so. When you live in Costa Rica, it's like having Monopoly money. Like a full dinner costs like $2.
Sure.
Yeah.
If you're renting a 3-bedroom house, it's like, I'm not making this up. I had an acre of property, a 3-bedroom house, internet. This was a cabin up in the woods, just a view of the foothills, clean water, the most beautiful running path you've ever been on. I was paying $300 a month for that house, and everybody was telling me, you got ripped off. You could have gotten it for $200. And then you come back to the United States and it's just like, God, I got to get working, man. Everything is pricey here. And then you got to start giving a third of your income to the government. Whereas when you're abroad, you obviously have the exemptions.
You're not pawning jewelry for a donut quite yet, but New York could do that to you.
Not quite yet. That's why everybody looks so damn desperate out here, man. Everybody's going crazy.
So did the rap battle get your juices flowing? Like, oh, I got to get back into this.
Actually, not really, because those guys are just so much better than I could ever hope to be. It's amazing. They'll have like the junior level guy out there can freestyle every single round and is putting things together I never thought of. I was like, man, like this is brutal. New York does not play when it comes to battle rap. If you go out to those smaller markets, obviously, I could teach either of you guys to smoke half these kids, but like this, New York's a different ball game, man. These kids come out to fight.
You said three words, and someone bought you a bus ticket to Bismarck. Said you're ruining this whole fucking scene, man.
Yeah, right.
Go where you can handle it.
Yeah, exactly. You get it.
I played cards with Peter Morris last month, I think it was, and at the Win, and he was talking about that, doing his battles and stuff. He's got some gig where he's going out to Europe somewhere. They're paying for his whole trip, giving him like $3,000. And they were afraid that wasn't enough. He's like, this is amazing. A free vacation for a week and you pay me to do 20 minutes of work? I'm done.
He always appreciates it too. That's one of those guys that genuinely just likes writing, just likes preparing. My God, dude, he goes out to this biker bar, it looked like, in Staten Island. He doesn't know any of the kids there or any of that. He shows up. 20 minutes later, he just destroys everything as far as how good it is, right? Yeah. Has the entire crowd laughing their ass off when he does a joke, has the entire crowd leaning in when he's doing something a little more harrowing. That guy's got it going on, man. I traveled an hour and a half to get out to Staten Island just to see that guy perform, and it was worth every second of getting out there.
Oh, that's cool.
That's cool.
You ever talk to him about his, I know you're into like Steve, you're not just like to learn things, you're like a student of how other people learn. Did you ever ask do you know his method? I mean, does he does he have a special room where he raps, or he needs total silence or something like that? An album he likes to listen to get, I mean, these are the questions to ask him. I'm just curious if you kind of know some of that stuff.
You're asking me or Steve? I could actually tell you a few of the things he does.
I have no fucking clue.
You.
Go ahead, Alex.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, one of the things he does, if you pay attention to his battles, that's really interesting. The biggest thing that screws up most battle rappers is they'll be between stanzas and they can't remember what the next concept is. And that leads to the most awful thing you'll ever go through as a performer, which is choking in front of 200, 300 people. And you'll notice what he does is he'll rhyme one word in the last part of one concept to the first word in the next concept. That way he can always remember the word that rhymes, and that'll lead him to the next concept. And that's why he has an impeccable track record. He might literally have 200 battles across 10, 20 different countries. And I think he has one choke out of all of them, or two, maybe, right? And the one time he did, it was one of those, he flew 12 hours, showed up and had to rap. And it's like, yeah, okay. I imagine that would be pretty difficult for anyone, but that's one of the things he does that's really interesting. The other thing that's super interesting is I've seen that guy before in numerous battles. He always says, I'm as ready as I'm ever going to be. Most people never get over I don't even know if he'd call it stage fright, maybe the excitement that comes, or like a Donny Osmond or Barbara Streisand, they still get jacked up before they have to go perform. I know completely different genres, but everybody gets jacked up before they got to go perform in any arena. So the whole idea that you're just not going to be anxious, excited, whatever word you want to call it, for being up in your head a little bit, that's never going to go. You just have to work with it. And if you watch him before he performs, he really does work with it, because you'll see him just repeat the battle to himself again and again, go off, be alone by himself to get the words right. And then that's what leads to those astounding performances.
He definitely is always the most calm and collected one on the stage.
Oh yeah.
Like I belong here. Listen, I don't need to do any like hype up the crowd kind of shit. Just listen to me because this is on the top dog here. You know.
Yes, sir. The Godfather doesn't have to do anything. Probably doesn't even have to introduce himself anymore. Everybody knows who he is.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah, it's funny. I don't know. Did you see the latest Dave Chappelle show on Netflix?
Oh, I did. It was unbelievable. So
He's a
good.
genius. But all I can think is watching that is like, how many times does he have to do it to make it like this perfect? And he knows exactly every word, like where he's going to be looking in the crowd, every expression. It's like, it's just fun to see like a genius at work, I guess.
Oh yeah. I've been actually thinking about, is that the best stand-up special I've ever seen in my life? I keep thinking that a lot because something I noticed, if you go back and watch it, you don't really know his stance on any issue. He's just making fun of all of us. If you pay attention, left, right, center, he hits everybody, and you can't really tell what his positions are. Now, if you do a little Googling, you'll find, okay, he's a practicing Muslim. He probably has some affiliations, or he probably has some beliefs that run a little bit more conservative. But if you actually just take him, if you actually just look at what he's saying, he gets everybody in this time in society. And what was that one? The Anthony Bourdain joke might have been the funniest joke I've ever heard in my entire life. It was so brutal, but so good. That was.
I gotta watch this one.
You have to. You haven't seen it? Oh my God, you would really love it, man. It's the best comedy pulls a mirror to everybody and just shows us what we don't want to admit about ourselves, and it's flawless. It's absolutely flawless. You'll see exactly what we're talking about.
Okay.
But it's also he's reached a point of such fame and comfort with the audience, and knows like the best line or how he sets up the whole thing was, I'm going to do an imitation so you can guess who it is. He's like, if you do anything wrong in your life, and he's like, that's you. That's what the audience sounds like to me. And so basically a lot of it is about kind of.
Yeah. He starts his set insulting his fan base and gets away with it. That's how good he is. That does not seem like it would go over well at most comedy clubs, but he's so good, and the point is so salient and so true. It really sticks. And yeah, I guess we should talk a little bit of cards, although it's fun talking battle rap and Chappelle.
Yeah, it's a poker podcast.
I was going to switch. I was just telling Steve a couple. I was just telling Steve of a couple. I like the true crime shows, the murder and mayhem. I'm kind of not easy to shock.
Yeah.
But I watched your video, and there was on the bottom right screen was something that terrified me. Two words were written: Sassonato University. If that's not the goddamn end of Western civilization, I don't know what is. I quickly turned it off and ran and put on a documentary about serial killers. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, the serial killers are the deities in our society now. You think Aaron Hernandez jersey doesn't cost $500 on eBay right now? Women aren't swooning for him watching that Netflix special. Like, I could have straightened him out. I would have known what to do, right? It's so funny. Like, you can't become infamous really in America if you look at like what people cover. Like, oh, the Ted Bundy special. Like, oh, he was a good-looking killer. Let's look at him. I watch a lot of the true crime stuff too on Netflix. I enjoy it immensely, but at the same time, sometimes I'm sitting around, I go, what the hell am I watching? Like, why do they deify these people?
Yeah. There's got to be something deep and dark in everyone's subconscious, or Dexter and programs like that would never be so successful because universally everyone likes them. I don't know why. There's something morbid about us there.
It's the same thing. If you think about like football or boxing, it's like, what is boxing? Well, these two guys are going to put gloves on and they're going to beat the crap out of each other. And, that's all it is. Yeah. And it's a sport that's been around 3,000 years. And they have had boxers die. this year, not a boxer, multiple boxers. That's just a gladiator game. That's a fight to the death. And we still watch it. I still watch it. I love it.
Yeah.
But that's something, you're right. That's just something that's in our blood. And you look at football, that's just essentially warrior games. My tribe is going to take this pelt to the other side of the field, and we're going to stamp it down in your ground, right?
Yep.
Like if a Martian was looking down at us, he would go, oh, that's like the mating ritual of the males. Like, this is their dance, what they're doing. They slam their heads against each other. But anyways, I digress.
That's an interesting point. I never thought of that like that. You know, that's no different than two bucks sparring or rams clobbering each other.
It's the same damn thing. And the cheerleaders dance would be the female mating dance. Like, if any Martian was looking down, that's just what they would assume, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, anywho.
The Martians would be wondering what you're doing in Camden, New Jersey, I think, as well.
There was,
I don't know if they're going to be looking at people so intimately at each individual. You know?
I was in Philly to play some poker, and we went to Camden, New Jersey, because they have an aquarium out there, and that was actually quite interesting. I'd never really gone to that many aquariums till recently. It's nice to look at aquatic life. It's nice to look at biological organisms, right? Because you just get so into your computer all day when you play poker, you forget, like, man, there's got to be real stuff out there I got to take a look at some point.
Yeah. You know, I getting back to doing this show. When I started doing this show, I never realized like how much poker stuff I would get. You know, people kind of send me stuff all the time, books and all that, and I just got a shirt recently and then washed it once and it just completely fell apart. And, you know, so most of the stuff I get is just crap. And it's kind of rare that I get something that comes across here that is gold. And, you know, whenever I get any of your stuff, Alex, it's exactly just that. And whatever you put out on Tournament Poker Edge or your books or your videos, it's I love it. And so you got a 3-hour training pack for our listeners at the end of the show, right? And this one I have not seen, so I'm pretty excited. What's in it?
You Flat Too Much is just about 3-betting people.
Okay.
It's about when if you've ever been at the table and you're at the cutoff and you have King 10 offsuit, you have the same guy just opening ahead of you constantly, and you know there's got to be a way to go back at that guy some way. This video will show you exactly how to do it. It talks a lot about online play too.
Okay.
If you want to use the HUD statistics and whatnot, it'll show you exactly what to focus on. But if you don't have the HUD, if you're on one of the anonymous sites or you're playing live, it'll show you a lot of the combinatorics, how to use Flopzilla, how to know what boards they miss, how to know what boards they hit, when to attack, when to back off. It's a lot of stuff like that, reasserting your dominance on the button, on the cutoff. And yeah, it's free. It's like 3-4 hours long. I forget the official tally, but yeah, you can just check it out. Click on the link. You got to give us an email address to be able to send you the content. That'll sign you up for my newsletter. So every day you'll get a free podcast, an article, some piece of strategy advice. But yeah, you can just get the free pack and unsubscribe if you'd like, if you want to do that, if you don't want your email address anywhere. But yeah.
Okay. You can get that by clicking in on the link in the show notes. We'll put one right down there. Free 3-hour training pack. And,
Yes,
thank you. I appreciate that,
Just
Alex.
the
That's
same,
cool.
I may be prepared. I watched a video on mastering small stakes cash games. Is that your latest video, or is this an old one I saw?
That is the latest video.
Oh,
That
okay, okay.
Yeah, that one's 13 hours long. That one's a slightly bigger hike.
Yes, that was really good, man. I got through it, and I want to go through it again. It took me a little over a month because there was a lot of stuff there, but you're just hammering the fundamentals.
Yes,
you know?
sir. Yes, sir.
And it was very, very good.
No, I'm glad you appreciated that. I find something poker coaches do, and I'm not immune to this, is sometimes we really like to focus on little details because that's how poker players think, right? It's like, oh, look at this little detail. That means I should do that. Or look at this little detail. But that's kind of, if you're teaching somebody poker, that shouldn't be the first lesson, the second lesson, the third lesson. That should be like the 208th lesson if you're doing the small details, right?
Yeah.
It's like teaching cooking and you're you're focusing on the garnish, like in the first lesson, right? You should start with the recipe. What should you preheat the oven to? What are the ingredients list? Like what techniques you're going to need. And I'm glad you appreciate it. It's just the fundamentals, because once you know the fundamentals in 100 big blind cash game poker, it's a much more simple game. Did you feel like it made a whole lot more sense once you were done with the videos?
Yeah, it did.
Good. No, I'm happy to hear that.
It was very good. And you have a lot of examples in there. You know, you're like, all right, Turbo, you're sitting down right here. You're at a 2-5 game. You've got 100 big blinds. This is the action. What do? You got 20 seconds. And it really makes you feel like you're sitting at the table there. You know, you can imagine the kid in the hoodie with the earphones on that you described on the button, and you're in the small blind or whatever, plug in the scenario. You know what I mean? It was cool.
He's actually sweating bullets, holding a little towel to his head as he has to for 20 seconds.
Yeah. No, I'm really glad you appreciated that, because that's I read something somewhere that if you just tell somebody something, they're going to remember 20 to 50% of it. But if you quiz them on it and actually kind of make them feel a little embarrassed and lost for a second, they're going to remember 80% of it. So I put every single thing in a quiz format, because that's how I learn too. Like when I take notes on a poker training video.
That's why you do that. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. It's a little bit of a hack to help people remember things, right? And it's fun because you can go back again and again and see how good you get with the answers. But it's the same thing if you're taking notes during a poker video. Just put everything in the form of a question, and then it's going to be in chronological order anyway. Then when you're done, read all the questions. And if you find there's one you can't answer, just go back to that part of the video and watch it again, because apparently that was the part you didn't check out. And then you'll retain 80% of the information. Whereas every single one of us has probably watched a training video before bed. And then you remember like none of it.
Yes.
You know, you remember the first 5 minutes because you've watched it 20 nights in a row, and then you nod off. That's not it, right? So I kept doing that when I was starting. I figured out I got to get way better at this. So I just Googled note-taking techniques, and that's the one that seems to work the most.
Okay.
Where do you get
that
the,
makes sense. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say, where'd you get the idea for doing the cash one? Because it hasn't like 99% of your material previously been tournament stuff. I mean, do you, where do you come up with ideas? Are you like the Dave Chappelle, this comedian walks around with a notebook writing jokes? Are you like, are you walking around like on the streets, of Paris, like, oh, small stakes cash games?
Yeah, like ooh la la, check it out, the aviation club. But no, I actually, the way I started, I used to play tournaments primarily, and then there was one year I had where I realized, hey, tournaments aren't very stable. I got to pick up another skill. And I started playing cash games, and I really fell in love with cash. And a lot of the money I made initially was just playing 1-2 on just weird networks, right? Like essentially, if it was really hard to get the money on and off the site, it was probably softer because a lot of regulars were probably going to give up at some point. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of risk in that too, because there were definitely times like, I'd have $600 on a site and the site wouldn't give it to me, and I just had to write that off or whatever it was. But as the years went by, at most of these tournament stops, I do try to play cash at some point. And the same concepts just keep working, especially live, because people never get better. They just don't. Everybody who keeps telling me poker is getting tougher, I'm like, not in the games I'm playing in, not in Philadelphia it is. Like this, now obviously there are certain places, if you go to San Jose, California, it's getting tough. If you go to LA, it's getting tougher. But if you're in one of the if you're in one of the newer markets, a lot of people are not getting better. And if you're playing 1-2, that's where most people come to punt, right? 2-5 and above, you will see people get better, but you'll still see a lot of guys come in with $200 because they were going to place a bet on the game, and now they just want to play some cards. And the same damn thing works all the time, especially now because it's socially acceptable for people to call. You can 3-bet to whatever you want. They're probably not going to fold pre-flop. Yep. And if you do that with the right hands, you can play a very conservative strategy and make a ton of money with it. In fact, in that video series, I'm sure you guys saw this as you went through it, I tried to find the tightest player I could find out of my circle of friends. And I found a guy who short stacked his way to 6 figures. And I said, give me your strategy. And he literally wrote it on the back of a napkin.
On a napkin, yes.
Yeah, it was literally, he was like, that's it. That's the whole thing. I swear to you, that's it. And I know the dude and I believe the dude. And it's literally just like suited Broadway's 8s plus. Ace Queen plus is what he starts with, and then he alternates it a bit based on the action. And it's not brain surgery. It's people call too much out of position, and you can take advantage of that with short stacks to begin with. And then as you move up to 100x, you can take advantage of that continually if you just learn a couple post flop tricks.
Yeah.
Isn't it, you're talking about live, I mean, maybe isn't online cash gotten really tough though? I mean, I heard like it's tougher to beat 1-2 online than it is to beat 5-10 live.
Oh, hell yeah. It's tougher. That's a really good point. Yeah. This stuff will work at like 25 NL, 50 NL, and 100 NL on softer networks. And especially if you get on the networks you should be playing on, say, if your country's got a lottery website and they have poker on it, that actually, I think Canada has one of those and Sweden has one of those. You can play on that. Or if your sports book has, a poker site or something like that, you will find softer action. You will find softer action as long as the software is atrocious. And the hunt is on now, but it's been liberalized a little bit with Bitcoin, because back in the day, there was no way for any of these fly-by-night sites to get money on and off.
Yeah.
But Bitcoin, like they can just set it and forget it. They just automate the whole site. Like practically, they've gotten to shave down so many of the employees because they're not working with payment processors like they used to. It's just all Bitcoin. So there's spots out there you got to work harder for it. But yeah, if you're trying to be 1-2 on PokerStars, that's not technically, I guess that's small stakes, but you're going to be playing with guys who are 24 tabling and are looking at analytics every morning and drinking their coffee and taking their nootropics and, meditating and like doing 100 push-ups. And I don't want to play poker with those people. I want to play with drunk people watching hockey, man. That's what I'm looking for.
I love that. Your first lessons are pick the right table.
Yeah,
game selection.
That's 90% of the game. You can
right. Yeah, just don't play with players that are better than you.
Right, and then we literally talk about how to play the top 5% of hands. Pick the right table. Pick these hands. It's like I could literally leave, and it would be worth the price of admission at that point. Right? It sounds unfair, but that's it. A lot of it's private games too. If you can get your ass in a private game, and I'm not talking, if somebody invites you to a private game from a casino, be extremely wary. But if your buddies are programmers at Microsoft and they have a little 1-2 game going, learn to be one of the boys, right? Go in there, and if they beat you in a pot, you got to clap them on the back and go, nice hand, right? And remember little details. That's all. This is what I've heard. That's all Chip Reese used to do. Is he was just so good with everybody in Vegas. They only wanted to play with him because he'd remember, children's birthdays and stuff like that. Again, this is all stuff I heard. I don't know this firsthand. But yeah, once he sadly passed, that was all those games dried up because people didn't want wealthy people do not want to get worked over at a poker table and have it rubbed in their face. If they get to play with a pro who is good at the table and is kind to them and on occasion beats them, but still cheers for them when they get one over on them, they know they're a losing player, just like a lot of people know they're losing in roulette when they play, but they'll still love the experience so much they'll keep coming. And you got to have that touch, which is really difficult to have, and you got to be able to find the games.
I've heard, people say pretty much what you're saying is that the people long-term who make the most money in poker are the ones who know how to get in, know how to make rich people have fun at the poker table.
Yes, it's the whole thing. It's all private games. It's all my buddies who are doing the best, and when I've done the best, a lot of it is private games, and a lot of it's getting the money out though, which in some of these private games is. You can also find really soft games where it's not as safe. That's another way you can play. And we've all heard about those games, but I wouldn't recommend that. It's all about, if that's why you got to have a social network that isn't just poker players. It's not a bad thing to keep your day job if your day job gets you meeting people in other industries who might play poker. Everybody plays poker. If you bring up, you guys have experienced this. If you guys talk about poker at any party, every guy above the age of like 23 has a poker story. Everybody and their mother apparently played poker for beer money in college, right? Nobody lost in college. They all played for beer money in college, right?
Yeah.
And all these people play, a lot of them do play poker somewhere. It's just about getting in these games and seeing what you can do with them. And a lot of them have their own, this is a new thing. There's private poker software now where a lot of people will use poker software and they'll settle up later. So you can get in private games like that as well. But a lot of it's schmoozing, and that's kind of the art form.
Yeah. Yeah. Your whole section on that, getting into private games, I'm like, that's an aspect that I've never really taken the time to master. And I remember, Tim Kelly from TPE.
Oh yeah.
He was telling me, he's like, that's really like what I do. He's all, once a week I go play private games, and he said, 3 out of 4 times it's a winning session.
Yeah, exactly, because he knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
You don't have to be the best poker player in the world. You just got to be the best guy at your table.
Exactly.
And whatever they want to play for is what they want to play for.
Yeah.
That's it. And yeah, Mr. Kelly's up in Canada, right?
Yeah.
Lot of games there. There's a lot of games in weird places like Alaska. Not as great an internet as the rest of the country. So what do people have to do all day? Especially you get back from fishing, you got this money burning a hole in your pocket, and it's a little while till the bar's open. Yeah. There's a lot of weird places games open up, right? And then if you go abroad, you find more opportunities, but then the danger level goes up, obviously, as a foreigner.
Yeah, yeah. But,
yeah, there's a big game going on down here. I haven't been invited, and I couldn't afford to anyways. But it is interesting. I hear all the details about how you run it and how the game goes. And not only do you have to be friends with try to be friends with the whales. If it's a pro who's running the game, you got to get on his good side too.
Oh yeah,
you might have to pay a little bit to get in that game.
Yeah, exactly, which he's on the take. Whoever that pro is doing it right, though. That's the whole point. You look at how well a lot of those guys, Doyle Brunson, Chip Reese did back in the day. I don't think a whole lot of that was Bobby's room. They were running the games, right?
Sure.
So yeah, if you know that guy, that'd be a great guy to be talking with. But yeah, you probably have to grease the palms knowing how this works.
Yeah, I don't know. I got you. Made me wish I had a nice house with a poker table, because I was told how this game works they got food and women and professional dealers, and it's paradise, but the way they pay back, they don't rake the pots, but the guy who runs the game gets 10% of all the wins at the end of the night. Which, if it's a big game on the probably the average night, there's going to be $100,000 in winnings.
What is he, Jesus? Are you tithing? Where did he come up with that number?
This is what I heard. I haven't been there.
You got to go check it out now, dude. Come on.
I couldn't afford. I'm having trouble getting money for these red chip games, Steve. Let alone the.
Yeah. Well, that's the crazy thing. You'll play like 2-5 in a tougher market, and those guys used to be playing 25-50 on stars. You'll get 3-bet every time you open, and really the best poker player thing to do is the third time it happens, just go, I'm out.
Yeah, I'll find a new table.
Yeah, exactly. I am driving 3 hours, or in fact, I will up and move to get out of this city. It's crazy how different the games are. Like if you're in Washington, D.C., how different the games will be compared to Los Angeles, compared to even just different parts of Las Vegas, just dramatically different games. The whole art is game selection. And yeah, the private game part is obviously the sexiest, the one we want to control the most, but it's the most difficult to control.
Yeah.
Yeah, I probably should be better. I haven't been invited to a couple smaller ones and haven't gone.
Oh, you should go.
Which is stupid. Well, I hear 1, 2, and I'm like, but then my one buddy's trying to get me to his, and he's like, listen, dude, it's people are just buying and buying and buying.
Brother, yeah.
I'm sure, yeah, you're probably hourly in that game, still $50 an hour in a 1-2 game.
Oh, more than that, dude, because people just keep rebuying. They don't know what they're doing. That's like all I'm after these days. It's just that. You know what I mean? Like 1-2 sounds like nothing until you show up and everybody has 1,000 on the table and they don't understand big bet poker. You should really check that out. You probably crush that with what you guys do normally. Like if you're hanging in like normal cash games at a casino, that stuff's just like child's play.
Right.
Anyway.
Well, yeah, I'm justifying. Well, I can't waste the night. I got to get my rake back. You know, it's 8 hours here. But
that's how they get you.
Sometimes it's a very EV neutral game where all I'm getting really is the rake back. You know what I mean? So
right, exactly. Well, and I assume there's no rake at your friend's game, right?
I did not. The only one home game I did go to, there was a rake. I mean, again, there was a nice food spread and everything like that. So yeah, somehow the house has to get paid.
Yeah, but
because they are investing money, and you know, I mean, usually their guy is always having it just to make a few shekels, obviously.
Right. That's why you gotta. Yeah, if it's a really nice game, that tends to get me suspicious because it's like, wow, they really want me to be here. Why? Right?
Yeah.
Cheating does happen at these games, right? If it looks like something a bunch of high schoolers could have thrown better, that means these guys probably do something else with their day job and their time.
Sure.
Right?
Okay.
That's, you know, like the case of chip. The one thing you got to make sure it's not like drugstore chips, because then obviously that's way too easy to cheat. Somebody could just bring in something else from the drugstore. But yeah, like if they have a good chip set and you're like at a conference table or whatever, the best one was like playing in the back of a brewery when I was a kid, right? Like that was, everybody there was just to have fun, right? And it wasn't run particularly well. But yeah, I get really suspicious when it looks really nice. And then, yeah, you can usually tell with a rake, right? If they're forgetting to take a rake or if they're doing a token rake, they're clearly not doing it for the money. They just want to play. If it's 10% of your winnings per se in this dramatic far out world, they're clearly there for the money. Man.
If I walk in the door and a beautiful woman locks eyes with me, I should immediately just get out, probably.
That's actually a pretty good rule of thumb. Yeah, that happens at a lot of like.
Why are people happy to see me? Sprint to the car.
Yeah, I knew it was all a lie.
What are all these dumb Barton-esque grins everywhere? No, those aren't normally this many happy people in one place. You know.
Oh God.
So, well, before we go into the specific, so if you had, let's just say back in the day, you were running a stable. If you had to hire a bunch of people, you'd probably want them to play live cash. I mean, is that the most profitable thing in poker right now?
It's it depends on the rake structure. Yeah, it's the most consistent. There's a lot of times you will see like smaller markets increase the rake to a point where it's just not feasible to make money.
Right.
And the recreational players don't care because they're not tracking it. And why would the casino even want the pros there? Oftentimes the pros are making the games worse. So yeah, as long as the rake structure is fine though, it's you're fine with it. And but I remember one time in Uruguay, it was like 5% uncapped or something like that. It was just yeah, and all the recreational players were playing because they didn't understand it. Right. In Budapest, I saw the same thing. It was, you try to do the math, like how many pots have to happen before all the money is off the table. And it's some astoundingly low amount. They're just trying to take all of it. But yeah, if you see like a normal rake structure and yeah, that's definitely the most stable. Tournaments used to be much juicier than they are now because people just didn't understand push fold and whatnot. And a lot of that stuff, the 30 and 40 big blinds, there's still some tactics you can use, but a lot of them aren't as great. So ironically, a lot of the big edges you get in tournaments is you're using cash game strategies, extremely loose cash game strategies at the beginning of tournaments, and you're establishing a chip advantage that other people are not going to have when they have 30, 40x and you have 70x. And that means your double barrels, your check raises, your 3-bets are going to threaten all of their chips. But if you go from 70 big blinds to 60 big blinds, that's not a big deal. That's the big edge you'll find in tournaments these days, but that tends to play itself out more in the slower form of tournaments, which isn't always the most popular at casinos or on the internet.
Sure.
So, yeah, so I would typically say, yeah, cash would be where it's at.
Okay.
So I wrote down I don't know if we want to, Steve, if you have any hands, I didn't look it up, but the 5 biggest rules. Do we want to go that? This is the one video I saw. They're all good. Sometimes a lot of these are pretty obvious, I guess, but only when you hear them.
it should.
Do you know what I mean?
No, I know what you mean. The more, I don't know, the more I feel like when you're trying to impress someone, the more likely it is to be BS. You know what I mean? It should be just blatantly obvious once you get it, right? It should smack you over the head, hopefully.
Don't pay off the nut peddlers is number 1.
Yeah.
I seem to do that quite a bit. So I've gotten pretty good with that.
That took me a decade. I finally started tracking it all the time. You know how you do it? You click Flat River on your hold a manager filters and just watch the hundreds of times it's like, here's a college education, my friend. You need it, right? Like you're just giving them away all the money. It's like, here's some money for your kids. Here's some money for their private school. Here's something for your wife. Get yourself something nice. Get a new suit. You're just giving it all away. It's so easy to delude yourself when it's at the end of a 6-8 hour session. You're exhausted, but if you just watch them all back to back to back to back to back, and you just have some basic rules, you'll get away from doing that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially I'm in a smaller card room. At this point, I should know a lot of the player pool and guys who never, I'm like, oh, he's turning this into a bluff, obviously. No.
It's upset.
He's never bet a misdraw on the river ever.
Right, exactly.
This is going to be the one time.
Right, exactly. Because it's just so easy to see that. Well, and the other thing is if you do one bad call, that's your whole session. 20, 30, 40x, that's like what you were trying to make the entire day. If you think about it, and that's the big one.
Number 2, pissing away money with bad C-bets.
Yes, sir. A lot of people do that.
Yeah, I mean, to really know your C-bet strategy, this is a major investment of time, right? I mean, this is going to be a lot of time with Flopzilla.
Well, you can start with some basics. Yeah, you could look at this for the rest of your life if you really want to get into the solvers and everything and get optimal frequencies. But you can start with some basics that'll help you, which is typically if a guy's a little nittier and he called you from an earlier position, you open from, low jack, he calls you from high jack, and he's a little bit of a tighter player. Most of that's going to be like big pairs, it's going to be big cards in pocket pairs. So if you see a flop with 2 cards 9 or higher, he has just hit it all the time. Like just all the time. He's hit it. He has a pair. He has a pocket pair, or he has one of the pairs on the board, right? So that's an obvious one you can start shutting down with. But versus, let's say a guy calls you out of the big blind. Well, he's calling with like 35% of hand. So if the board comes with 2 cards 9 or higher, you can try a small bet. He's out of position. It's very likely he's missed most of the time. But you could start with just some basics like that. And if you just save a couple C-bets per session with what I just said there, that's 3.5x, 7x, 9x every session. And then, obviously in the videos, we go through a lot more of the common spots.
Multiply by 2,400 hours and you see.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It all adds up.
I mean, I don't know if you could get you can't get a general enough rule here, but like you open and the difference between 1 caller and 2 callers.
Oh, yeah.
For your C-bet frequency. I know there's a couple of hands I think you kind of touch about this. I don't know. My default, I'm sure it's obviously wrong, is that I'm always, not always, but I'm obviously C-betting when I think I have the best hand and I want to get called.
Mm-hmm.
And if I C-bet where I'm bluffing, I want to have some back doors.
That's a good start. Yeah, that's really good. Well, the big thing is if you're multi-way, essentially, if you look at the combined time that people will both miss in a multi-way pot, so let's say you have 2 callers. If the big blind completes, that's a much wider range than, say, cutoff button calls you. Yeah. But anytime you have 2 callers, generally both of them will miss the board between like 25 to 40% of the time, depending on what the board is, right? So let's give that an average of 33%. Well, if you bet half pot, your bet would need to work about 33% of the time. So should you just be firing with nothing? Are reverse implied odds? Absolutely not. But if you're doing what you're talking about here, which is firing with some backdoor equity, that you can actually work, and you don't have to bet half pot. If they both just bricked, there's a really good chance, especially on the high card boards where they don't have any overcards, it's really likely they might fold to like 25% pot or something like that. So if you got some backdoor equity and you think you can get away with instead of half pot, maybe 40% pot or something like that, you can start finessing it a little bit like that. But the one thing you don't want to do, which you see a lot of guys do, is like raise, get called in 3 spots. The board comes ace 2-8. They have king queen. It's like, oh, that ace hit my range. Lead 75% pot. It's like session's over. The money's gone. Because my guess is one of these 4 guys has an ace, right? If you look at it combinatoric-wise, there's 16 different ways to make an ace X, right? As opposed to 4 different ways to make a suited connector, for example. So it's a little bit more likely the guy's going to hit one of his big cards, and that most common big card is going to be the ace. So yeah, with 2 players, you can finesse some c-bet bluffs. At 3, I would just start giving up, right? That's a lot of that's going to be like hit the flop and continue poker, or hit a lot of backdoor draws on a real hit or miss board and continue poker.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Number 3, not 3-betting enough.
Yes, sir.
I think we know your thoughts on 3-betting, the beauty of that, especially to isolate. I've been kind of on a short roll for a while, so I've been doing like playing pretty nitty here, which is profitable. There's times though where I'm like, normally I'd be 3-betting where I'm just like, okay, I'm in position, let's see a flop kind of shit.
Right.
Probably not optimal thinking. I'm trying to think of a good example where we're not 3-betting enough here. Would
Like
be
10-8 suited on the button to a loose opener or something, or what do you?
Yeah, well, I mean, even like pocket 9, let's just say someone opens 5x early position and you get 3 callers.
Right.
Pocket 9s, let's just say pocket 9s on the button versus the small blind. How are you playing them different in terms of flat or raise, bet sizing?
Right, you could get away with either. Like a call there is totally fine. And you can definitely squeeze if you know the first guy opens too damn much and all the cold callers call 20. If the first guy's opening 35% of hands and all the other cold callers are some of the special stuff you see on the East Coast, like king 2 suited's flatting, 5-8 suited's flatting, by all means, raise it up and set up a jam on most boards, right? And if everybody folds their pre-flop and you just pocket the 20x, that's amazing.
That's great.
Yeah, it's a huge deal. But let's say the first guy's on the tighter side, second guy is a little bit more careful. He's one of the smarter guys in the card room, and he cold calls. By all means, just cold call there, because that's a little that's obviously a little concerning. What worries me is when it becomes always call, even in the situations where almost assuredly you have the best hand. And with 100 big blinds, I know this sounds crazy, but that's not a ton of money. Like 200 big blinds, 300 big blind poker, that's when it gets really messy, right? But like you can get 100 big blinds in if you're the dramatic favorite with 1 raiser and 3 callers, pretty easy, or set it up versus wilder players like nothing. And what I get worried about is when sometimes 3-bet turns into always call, because then that puts us in a situation. We tend to do that when we're running bad. And the problem is it puts us in a spot where we have to start hitting flops like all the time in order to continue. There's not going to be much getting everybody to fold or getting overcards to fold that would have hit the flop or anything of that nature. So that stuff does worry me. If you're on a short roll, I would say short stack. Can you buy in for 40, 50x?
Yeah. You can buy in for 60 big blinds, I guess, would be the cheapest buy-in.
A little different. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So
I guess, I think not 3-betting enough is also like you're calling too many 2-bets with mediocre hands is probably another way to say it too, right?
Yeah, you can get away with that if you're a little deeper. Like let's say you're 150x deep and like the whale at the table is 150x deep. if he opens a 2.5x and you have 10-7 suited, you can make that work if nobody's going to squeeze you. The problem is when you're down to like 88x and now you're calling everything and the first guy who opens not that wide at all and somebody's squeezing behind you, then that 3-bet becomes the thing about 3-betting is it's just a clarifier. And until, maybe in 2025, people will learn to semi-bluff more by 4-betting back at 3-betters or cold 4-bet more. But until that time, you just get away with so much when you 3-bet in position, to the point it still confuses me that it works so well.
I remember when you looked over my analytics, you're like, okay, right here, every time you open, you're making 1 big blind. Every time you call, you're making half a big blind. And every time you 3-bet, you're making 2.36.
Right.
What should you be doing, Steve?
Right. And after you look at 1,000 databases and you see the same thing, and I just assumed I was looking at things wrong or something. Like there must be some trick to this, right? Because it just seems if you 3-bet in position, people just fold too much to you on the flop. That seems to be the big thing. A lot of people go, let me see if I can hit this flop. Okay, I missed this flop. I'll fold, right? And something you can do is just highlight their worst hands in the range to make sure they're not making like 3 big blinds with their best hands, and then the crappy hands they 3-bet bluff are actually dragging everything down. Not to make sure, not to look at everything as this big category. But even when you filter for the bluffs, a lot of guys still get away with it. It's out of position where all bets are off. If you 3-bet out of position, like you are not a coward if you get scared of that. Like things can go wrong very rapidly. It just seems that even if you're making mistakes in position 3-betting, a lot of times it can work out as long as you do the right sizings, which we talk about quite a bit in that pack.
Yeah. Right on.
Not isolating raising enough.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
Is trying to not squeezing enough.
Yes, sir.
Is that what essentially means? I've had a trouble with this one a lot.
Yeah, it's tough.
When I play, I'm playing a fair amount of 2-3 with a 400 cap. Maybe 10 to 20% of my play is at there, and the rest is at the red chip. Sometimes I go in and the 2-5 doesn't begin. But it's hard to get heads up in that game.
Oh yeah.
People just like seeing flops.
Oh yeah, we talked about that. Yeah.
Maybe we talked about I've got a lot of hours logged in with only like $13 an hour there. So something's not right. I know I've got to maybe start limping early position, because like when you're only playing 130 big blinds, that again, your SPR can get, if you squeeze and 3 people call.
Well, I would start looking at one of the easiest things to play with in Card Runners EV is just jams pre-flop, and seeing if there's times, like even with shorter stack jams, like you could short buy, and if like they just want to gamble with you, play to that. There's a lot of times if you can only buy in for 60x. I found a guy that made 6 figures, just all he does is sit there for 80 hours a week and just shoves the best hands, and people go, you know what, I hate you doing that. And then they call him, and then they try to fade him, and it obviously it works sometimes, and then they clap themselves on the back like they did something, but a lot of the time it doesn't. And if you have that reputation, I'd really look into that short stacking, because I'm sure you have a general player's reputation there. Like they've seen you bluff a few times, they've seen you chase, they've seen you do things that they wouldn't attribute to a short stacker. So it might take them a really long time to figure out you're not playing that way anymore. And I'd really, if funds can be, if you're withdrawing money from your poker bankroll a lot, so you're a little shorter, I would wonder if that would be a little bit more stable. Now, obviously, people not folding to you pre-flop, you can still make that work. And we show that in the series, or I show that in the series, just with like really huge squeeze amounts. And if everybody folds, that's fine. But a lot of times you might not get one guy, but you'll get so many guys calling that if you just do it with the best hands, it's pretty much one pair poker. If you make one pair or retain one pair and you shove, you'll oftentimes get called by a crappier pair and make good money. Now, the problem with this is you want to talk about variance mountain. obviously, I'm sure you're figuring this out with your $13 an hour, is I would bet a lot of that's variance, because you're getting a lot of, when people see you got a few big blinds there, they just call with everything, and sometimes they run you down, right?
Right.
Yeah, so that's the variance.
Well, I'm short rolled. I mean, I can afford this game. It seems, although I'm just thinking, we just described that. There's another casino I was playing at quite a bit, and there's one guy. I usually think if people buying short, they're definitely recreational or not good.
Yeah.
And in a 1K game, this guy was always buying for 500 and 600. I was there always when the game began.
Mm-hmm.
And he would always seem to double up, though,
Exactly.
Because yeah. And then I'd pay attention. I'm like, I mean, he's still, I don't know if he's a pro. He plays too wide, but he also understood like the stack. I mean, if you're 3-betting, guys just have to fold your 3-bets a lot when you're playing off 100 big blinds versus 300.
Right. And if you watch, sometimes you watch cash games on TV when they allow people with like 30, 40 big blinds in, there was a lot of short stack technicians that what would happen is, wealthy businessman opens like he does every pot, 2.5x. Really good pro has 200 big blinds calls, 2x, 2.5x, whatever it was, two other guys call, and then short stacker puts in 40x. And it comes around, well, everybody has a hand good enough to open or call if this guy's loose open, but they don't have a hand for 40x. They all fold. If you're playing like 50, 100, like that is a lot of money right there, 8x, 10x. And a lot of times they'll just, like maybe I can get this guy off the table. Did you see that where at some point they're just like, I just want to bust this guy because these all-ins are driving me nuts. And they start calling. I've seen calls with like 7, 8 of clubs. And the guy goes, well, I hope you're sitting down. I have queens. Good luck to you, right? And the short stacking stuff, I think sometimes when we look at poker strategies, there's I think the fancy word is called neomania. Like if it's new, it must be great. And the more complicated it is, the more we think it's valuable, right? Like, ooh, this must be like really technical. It must be getting edges I can't even fathom. But I'm really attracted to like, what is the simplest way to make money? I want the dumbest possible way to make money. And I don't care if it makes me look intelligent. I don't care if people cuss me out. And the dumbest, easiest way I've found to make it is short stack. And I played with that a little bit. My buddy has played a lot more with it. And you just see so many guys.
The rat holing.
Yeah, it's rat holing.
Some of the doesn't like some of the websites like find ways to prevent that. Like if you get in one game, take a quick hit.
Oh, but what you can do is you have your short stack strategy, and then you double up, and then you would be fine. Just go back to your full stack strategy.
Oh, okay.
You got in there for half price, right? And then here's the beautiful thing. Your HUD stats will be like 11-9, and then when you get full stack, maybe you're like 26-18, but like overall it's going to say 17-15, which is never what you're playing, ever. Like what they're reading is not accurate ever, right? Because you have two modalities that are on separate sides of the spectrum, right?
Your value only range when you're short because you're just looking to get it in.
Right, exactly. And obviously if they have more advanced HUDs, they're going to see through that pretty quick, but a lot of guys won't. Right? A lot of guys don't have time. They're playing so many tables, they'll look at it. And don't forget, most of the new sites won't allow HUDs. Those don't exist in a lot of sites, right? So they're just going to see you playing like a net for a really long time, and they'll kind of have it in their head, so-and-so's a net. And then you'll open up, and they'll be like, oh, I guess he opened up. And then when you come back with a short stack, and you can buy in. There's no law that says you have to buy in for exactly the minimum. You can make it look like you just lost a couple of pots. Maybe they'll think you got desperate. It's a really fun game to go after people this way.
I haven't done it. I want to try it. I see people work the table with it all the time. And until I saw it in your program, I'm like, oh, well, that's so easy. The guy wrote it on a fucking napkin.
I know, exactly. It's old school, man. I've been doing this for decades, like not decades, but over a decade. And it's amazing it still works, right? Especially live poker, because everybody just goes to punt. But yeah, if you buy in full stack, you gotta, like, you can still make money. And we talk about that in the program, but as we're experiencing now, as we're all discussing, like, God, the variance is insane. When if everybody tries to hunt you down, right, it can get pretty messy.
Yeah.
Number 5, not value betting enough.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've heard people have said that's like the difference. That's where your whole win rate is. Like good pros know how to get thin value on the river.
It's the whole thing.
Yeah.
In fact, I got owned one time in a game because the guy knew I was just like a low to mid stakes cash grinder, and he knew I was value betting too thinly on the river because that's the only way you can make a win rate in those games. And the guy like turned his third pair into a bluff because it looked exactly like a backdoor flush draw. And right after I folded, this was in some like big tournament in Vegas. The guy like showed me my hand. He's like, "You thinly value bet like an ace with like a 4 kicker, huh? Bad move." Right. And like there was nothing I could do because the guy just owned my soul. Right. That's where the whole like turning hands into bluffs becomes a big thing. But you don't have to turn a hand into a bluff most of the time at low stakes because nobody's value betting thinly enough. It's just top pair, top kicker are better, or they're missed draws. That's it. And a lot of guys get sick of betting their missed draws. So it's just top pair, top kicker are not are better.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The amateurs. I mean, everybody hates it. Hates getting betting for value and getting raised on the river and having to fold because
it's the worst feeling on earth. And it only takes being shown a bluff once to get a guy to never do that for the rest of his life. Just to check back with the hand and show the goods, because it feels so good to show everybody how well you played and to just scoop that pot and to not have to worry about anything.
Sure.
Yeah, but you only get raised probably 15% of the time or something. So the vast majority of the time it's a bet.
It's really hard to find out in cash games like what the percentage is, but every time I try to track it, it's really low, like even lower than 15%. It's only once you start moving up. Well, and then you'll get to guys who actually know what they're doing. It's way north of that. If they know you're a reg and you're thinly value betting, or you could bet as a bluff or whatever it may be. But yeah, typically people are not. It's really hard to catch people bluffing. As you said, paying off nut peddlers. Turns out a lot of people are nut peddlers. They don't want to feel bad about themselves. Getting caught with a bluff is like a, oh, look at you trying moment at most cash games around the world. So they end up just value betting. We pay them off. It's hard to catch people bluffing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think all the time about this, how important, especially we're talking about the low stakes cash, like, balance. Like, I'm always like, I definitely bluff a fair amount and I'll show my bluffs too. And I'm like, there's guys I play with, pros who don't seem to bluff at all. And they get paid as frequently as I do.
Right. Exactly. It just never comes up. Like I literally in this video series, I show like 6 bluffs and I go, okay, guys, that's pretty much it. Like just letting you know, those are the 6 I use most of the time. Like it's a great day of the year if I feel like a triple barrel bluff is going to work. But the truth is, most people fold on the flop when they don't have a pair. And after they've called with that pair, they really do not want to fold on turn or river. You can make a very good living gambling on, especially Americans not folding their pairs post flop in no limit hold'em. And you could really lose a lot of money trying to get the average no limit hold'em player to fold a pair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That happens a lot for me.
Yeah, exactly. And there's no need to balance because they just call you anyway, right? It's one of those things like, don't bet 2x the size of the pot on this river with the nuts because it'd be so obvious to this guy, or it could be so easily understood that you only do that with big hands. And it's like, really, this guy right here, Billy? Like you think Billy's gonna catch that, right? Or whatever the guy's name is. Well, my buddy Barry always makes the same point, which is after a hand at the table, and he plays a lot in the UK and the United States, you could pass out a survey to every player at the table after a random hand, and he believes 7 out of 9 of them wouldn't know the action and wouldn't know what happened with what hand where. He really believes that. And the more I think of it, I'm like, yeah, that's probably right, especially how many TVs there are in the typical card room, how much people are talking with each other between tables.
The phone is a huge one now, the big one that I've seen in the last 5 to 7 years. Is like,
that's the big one, man. Yeah.
People are watching fucking movies
I know.
on their phone.
I saw a kid, some kid was talking a lot of smack in Vegas, and he was watching anime on his phone. And I was just thinking, like, how are you going to do that, dude? Like, that there's a I have converted tournaments where I totally should not have cashed into cashes because I caught one guy bluffing based on one hand at the beginning of the day. Of course, it's the most draining thing in the world to watch every hand there is, and that's why people struggle with it. But you got to get through that. Did you see that new ESPN article that chess masters burn like 6,000 calories a day? Have you ever seen that? No, it was some new thing. When you're using mental energy, it apparently burns some absurd number of calories. And it's weird because I'm about 6 feet tall. I used to be 150 pounds when I was playing poker 60 hours a week. And I always wondered how that happened because I ate terrible back then. Maybe not as much as some other times, but it's just so draining to pay attention to every hand. So I think what most people do is, just the smartphones, the TV, talking to their friends, not paying attention. And so I don't think you need to balance nearly as much as many people seem to think you have to, especially if you're playing 2-3. Maybe 2-5, you got to start working it in. But I would never even think of it at 1-3, 1-2, unless I'm playing with some guy I just see all the time.
Just quickly to your point of how draining like the thinking is, that's often a decision I make if I'm going to stay late or not.
Yeah.
Like if there's a couple of good pros there, I'm like, okay, not only, it's 1 a.m., not only am I physically tired, I know my fatigue will increase because I'm going to have people playing at me and I'm going to have to constantly be thinking.
Exactly. That's actually
action.
That's a damn good point. Right. So especially if you got a guy to your left, it's much different than if the pro's on the other side of the table. So maybe if you got the whale somewhere closer to you at the table, but you got the pro like ways away, you might chance it for a bit. But if you got the pros to your left, you're just like, screw it. This is just going to piss me off at some point. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, I'm also just glimpsing at the future. I'm already, I'm 49 years old. And like, even if the little things when you get older, you're tired after play a lot of sessions. I think it's just, the mental energy is just going to be hard to keep up. You know what I mean? I think.
Oh God. Yeah, man. I feel it.
Unless you absolutely love the game, which I don't, gotta be honest. Which is a problem.
No, I mean, I absolutely love the game, and I'll play tournament poker for 3 days, and I feel like I come home and I just sit around for 2 days, 3 days, like I got the flu or something. It's so hard to pay attention to all the different stacks and everything. And when they have this thing, I don't follow esports, but they talk about in esports, like when a guy's like 27, he's washed up, right? Like, he's too old. He can't play computer games anymore. And when I first heard that, I went, what? That can't be right. Surely some of them are good. But now I'm just 32. And when I'm playing, there'll still be like, I play like a long session now. I feel it. Like I am just crapping out, right? And especially if I eat something bad, I just can't play. Like the next day, it's just like, well, I gotta, if I'm playing cash, it's like, I guess I can't play today. I got to go work on something with the business because like my focus just isn't there. And when I'm playing tournaments, it's so annoying now. I have to eat so much better than I used to because otherwise the focus just wanes, right? And you can't drink as much coffee because it'll burn you out. It's you don't think of poker as a physical thing, but it can really burn you out quickly if you're not managing it.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. This is why everybody's doing all their meditation and while they're doing those push-ups in the morning, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody says they're doing it, but that stuff's pretty hard to do. It always makes you wonder, right? But yeah, anyway, you got to look the part at some point. Anyway, what's the next one on the list, or did we get it?
I think that was it. Not enough value betting. Yeah. I think I think it's going to be a good series. Like I said, I only watched the first hour. Have you already started your next series, man? You're just such a fountain of energy here. I'm wondering what you're.
No, I think that's it for a while, man. I'm not doing a new series. It's just working on the list. I'm trying to play more. It's I just want to play more. I would never call myself a professional anymore because that's unfair to guys like you who are still in the trenches.
Right.
And like, you know what I mean? That's just not fair. It used to really piss me off when a guy would call himself a pro and he'd be so poised and he always seemed like he knew the answer. And then like 20 months after you met the guy, he goes, oh yeah, I'm a programmer. you know, 4 days out of the week. And it's like, well, obviously you're not worried about any of this with me. I'm like, and I've been taking your advice as like gospel, right? But no, I would never call myself a pro again, because that's not fair to the guys in the trenches, like really having to go at it. But I've just been playing a lot more lately, and it's just so
online.
Yeah, online, typically. Not as much tournament poker. And I do try to get out to some WPTs every year, the WCP main event, and just some of these smaller tournaments, you know, just trying to get out to like Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, DC, Baltimore, Montreal, a lot of these places around here where it's just newer markets, right? So you'll see things like in Philadelphia, I was just loving it. First guy opens under the gun, 5-8 suited, middle position, calls with ace-8 off. I squeeze to like 21x with ace queen off, both call, obviously. Board comes like 8-5 break. I check back. Anyway, they kind of give each other a conspiratorial look after the pot is over. Like, ha, we got him. And I'm just, is this 2020? Are you serious? And then, of course, I see stuff like that. And I'm like, I got to get out and play. But yeah.
Is there going to be a casino in New York soon? I remember that was always something that was discussed when I was out in the East Coast. I haven't, because so much money leaves the city going to Foxwoods and Atlantic City and stuff. I'm sure, obviously, there's enough people there to support a big casino.
Are so, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It cut out a little bit on my end. They are so broke. I would be shocked that it didn't happen. You know what I mean? Like, they're always talking about the budget shortfalls and stuff like that, right? And they're this close. I think the last time online poker was on the ballot, if I'm not mistaken, it missed by one ballot. So that's going to be, you would assume that's going to happen very soon. And then I think pot is decriminalized already here. So like, you'll walk down the street, you smell it all the time. The cops don't care about it. So that's going to be legalized like nothing here pretty soon. They're trying to make money. And yeah, if you put like even a tiny casino in Midtown, you could put any taxes you wanted on that thing. They'd still cover it. But yeah, it keeps getting closer and closer, right? It used to be, you had to go to Atlantic City. That was 2.5 hours. Then upstate New York, like an hour away, they opened those spots. And I think the closest one now is even less than an hour away. So it's amazing what it does to the cities. Like, have you guys been to Atlantic City recently?
No, not in probably over a decade.
Yeah, that place has changed.
They're making a comeback there?
Yeah, the Hard Rock is open, and that's actually a pretty nice venue. But like, you think about it, Atlantic City used to be Vegas with a beach. If you wanted to gamble on the East Coast, that was pretty much your only option. And then you open up Boston, you open up Foxwoods, you open up Washington, D.C., you open up Baltimore, you open up Philadelphia. No one's got to travel anymore, right? Like, so Atlantic City has seen just like half their properties closed. But it's really crazy walking the boardwalk, and you'll see like these 75-story palatial hotels just burned out like nothing and broken down. It's really, it's bizarre, man. It's a trip.
I'm stunned that these casinos and card rooms keep going up. I'm like, isn't there just not enough money for them? I think I could be wrong. I don't know if you ever played at Foxwoods before.
Nope, haven't.
I mean, that they were they were the biggest card room ever when they first came out. I mean, that's how they advertised themselves anyways. And they were always big. And last time I was there, like I said, the win Boston, I think, has to be the end for them. But I could be wrong. A lot of people, from New England were always coming down there, and now that place is big. But last time I went to Foxwoods, this is a few months ago, I got off the plane and drove down there, and there were like 12 1-2 games going and nothing else.
Wow.
You talk about how this is like a wet dream for the house, I guess, because every single dollar is staying there.
Yeah.
But I forget. I mean, it might have been like a Wednesday night, wasn't busy. They're like, oh, don't worry, that game usually starts around 8 p.m. or something like that. But I just got the hell out of there.
Well, remember when Foxwoods originally on the World Poker Tour, I think it was Nick Schulman won their major, and it was like $2 million.
Sure.
Back then, it was a $10,000 buy-in, and everybody showed up for it. Now, they haven't been a WPT stop in a while. I haven't watched the World Poker Tour in like 8 years or something, but I assume that's not a stop anymore or anything with any affiliation, right? And it is amazing how much these things change so rapidly. And Yeah, you wonder. I wonder what the end game is. Is that what you're curious about? Like in 5-10 years, what's the end game going to be on the East Coast?
Yeah, I guess. I'm just curious. I mean, like I said, it'd be great if there was a card room in New York if you lived there, but then don't a bunch of people in Philly, don't a bunch of people at Parks lose their jobs? I mean, like, it just seems like.
Yeah, it's at some point it's going to hurt a lot of people. Well, that goes into the whole political topic, right? There's the economy is supposed to add like 1 million jobs per year, and like for 10 years that hasn't happened. So there's a whole lot more people gambling than there used to be, and you're trying to create jobs and maybe they're not being created in the gambling sector. But yeah, it just gets into some territory where it's like, man, this is getting nuts really quick. It's really bizarre growing up like playing cards in everything, just to see the entire United States embrace marijuana and casinos like nothing, like overnight. You know what I mean? Like, it used to be you had to go to Vegas. Vegas was the one spot. Now it's like Detroit, North Carolina, Texas has card rooms now. Arizona has talking sticks. Turning Stone is still a thing. Isn't Turning Stone in the middle of nowhere?
Yeah,
right?
that's North New York, I think, right? Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that a dry casino too? That was what always blew my mind. Like, do they serve alcohol there? I can't remember.
I don't know. I did actually go there once, like 7 or 8 years ago, but I can't.
I went forever ago too. But yeah, and you look at like Sacramento's built up now, California's built up, Portland has card rooms now, right? It's just like,
we just had 2 guys on the show last week from Oregon.
Oh yeah, how were they saying the action is?
They said it was phenomenal. They talked about low rakes. Like, you walk into the casino, give them $15 and play as long as you want, and they don't pull a rake on the pot.
Man, I got to move to Portland now. I like what? I like Portland. I don't know. Portland.
Carlos Welch and low rake. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
You can deal with the rain.
Yeah, that's right. It's without going into details about that part of the country, it still worries me. Like Portland, Seattle. Have you guys been to Seattle lately?
No.
No.
Man. It's the golden age is over in Seattle, man. And Portland had a little of that too. You just worry about the homeless in these cities. That would be the one downside in Portland. It's like, is this place safe? Like, I had a guy like following me and like cussing me out in Portland. That was that was pretty bizarre to see. Just someone like being violently against me for
right.
I was just walking with my donut, man. I didn't know I did anything.
That's the homeless. Like, I deal with them all the time at work. They probably make up 30% of my emergency calls, and like you got to look at them as like they're all on drugs or they have some type of schizophrenia, and you just never know what they're going to do at any time.
Right.
You know? And sometimes they're completely harmless. Other times they're just freaking crazy. And you got to be careful.
Yeah, it is kind of funny. Like you said, at most, I remember one comedy writer was talking about the homeless issue. This was years ago, but saying basically, if you put these guys in a home, half are so crazy, they'll jump out the window, and half are so drugged out, they'll be crapping on the floor.
Yep.
Right.
It's not like you just like the homeless issue is like a mental health and an addiction issue. So,
yeah, well, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's you said 30% of your calls we're dealing with them. Even if the family is asking you to bring them home so they can get treatment, you guys legally can't bring them, right? Because they have to make those choices of their own volition. You can't get them any psychiatric services. Is that right?
That's pretty accurate. I mean, they just don't. They don't even. They were going to open up a giant. The city I work in bought a giant. What used to be an old thrift store, like a Goodwill, and they were just going to put them in there, like right across the street from my station. I'm like, oh, thanks. That's like a call and a half a day right there, minimum, right? Like, are you kidding me? Anyways, it fell through, thank God. But they just have no solution for this. You know what I mean? Like they're literally pitching tents. Like, you go down to Los Angeles, and they're pitching tents underneath. It's like homeless alley.
Well, there used to be anti-vagrancy laws, which is really how it's just.
And the cops can't do that anymore.
You don't actually have a right to sleep on the street.
Well, they do now. I mean, they have tents literally in the middle of our park in the center of the city. It's just like, this is ridiculous.
I read something that it used to be the psychiatric wards were essentially subsidized by all the people who had clinical depression before SSRIs were a big thing. And they just didn't know how to treat people with depression. So if you think of all the people who have depression today, imagine they couldn't get treatment back in the 60s and 70s. And you have a psychiatric ward and you had a lot of financial support because the families would come in and help out and pay something while this person got better, and eventually they'd rejoin society. So they were subsidizing people with schizophrenia and whatnot. And then the SSRIs came in and shut down a lot of these hospitals for lack. This is what I heard. I don't know if this is true, but that started causing it so that it was more of a freak occurrence that somebody actually needed hospitalization due to mental illness.
It can't be institutionalized if there's no institutions.
Yeah, exactly. There's no institutions, and it didn't come up that often for a little while, and now, whoo boy, is it coming up?
Yeah, it's politically incorrect to talk about, but not to get into, I lived in Newtown, right where the shooting was.
Oh boy,
of all the kids, it was like a mile away from it. But in Newtown, abandoned, we used to have like two, like massive mental institutions, which had been closed down through all the legal things, like you said, like 30 or 40 years ago. And like what I always said about this kid, he shouldn't have access to guns. He shouldn't have access to people. He should have been locked up and throw away the key. I hate to be insensitive. I mean, you have your nice do-gooding lawyers running around making sure there's no cruelty.
Right.
But if you're, when you're 20 years old and if you refuse to speak to another human being, including your mother, if you're staring murderously with just getting a haircut at the barber, it's like people, this isn't really, society doesn't have to endure this, I don't think. But, that's just my own. Right.
No,
I completely agree. There's got to be some giant place we can put them where they're not. We went on a call the other day for a homeless guy punching himself in the face in the middle of the street. Like, the hell am I going to do?
They need help. Like, do you have their social security numbers memorized at this point? Because it's the same guys calling in every time.
Oh, we got our regulars. Almost Daniel. Yeah. When he's
punching himself, do you bring him an 18-ounce glove and just say, "Here, go ahead. Just this will hurt less."
Yeah.
God.
It's and the cops, like, they don't even really know what to do with it. Like, they could take him to jail overnight or something. Okay, so he can't smoke his crack pipe until the morning, but you let him out and he just goes right back to doing it. I don't know.
It's not up to you guys. You're not mental health professionals.
Like,
no. Right? No. Well, what I keep being told is a lot of these people's families want to bring them home, but the person who's clearly off their meds or using a substance goes, I want to keep living on the street. And there's just nothing you can do at that point. And I don't know all the details, but that makes it really sad, because I'm sure a lot of these people, if they could get better, even after a couple of weeks, they might go like, oh my God, thank you for coming and getting me out. But instead it's just like 6 years and then they pass unceremoniously.
Yeah, I have seen briefly, sometimes we'll go on calls where the homeless people are at the family's house and it sounds like they're trying to do like get clean or something, but they haven't been. And so the family calls us and now we got to take them to the hospital and they're just right back on the pipe.
Good times. You got any of those calls on Christmas?
Yeah. Surprisingly a lot.
Yeah. I want to come home.
I took a class on basically how to be ready for meth labs. So when you walk into a house, because we go to 10 calls a shift that in some house you've never been in before, and how to recognize when you've walked into a meth lab and look for tripwires and also get out of there before the fumes get you and stuff like that. One thing the guy said was he talked about crystal meth. And it was interesting. He said that 33%, a third of all people that try meth, they become addicted to it for their life, and eventually it kills them. So just that one hit, a third of them, all of them, turn into a zombie, and eventually it kills them a few years later. That stuff is just radical. And then you have these people that are just pitching a tent out on the street, and it's dangerous, I think.
Yeah, that's disturbing. Well, and if you want to get even more disturbed, there's this new book called Fentanyl Inc. they got call centers in China set up just to ship you your fentanyl now, right? Like it's
Wow.
it is on. And a lot of these like synthetic drugs, you know what a meth lab smells like, looks like. You don't know what these synthetic drugs smell like, look like. You don't know what you're walking into, right? Yeah. Actually, you might not want to read that book. It's pretty terrifying. But the more I think of your profession and how many houses you go into, or maybe you do. It's fascinating to read where all this stuff started. Well, it's so bananas now. Like even kids in high school with synthetic marijuana and stuff like that. It's like the stuff that gets you 100 times higher. And you just have kids like overdosing and having strokes and whatnot. And all this stuff comes from China. And it says it's not, or I don't know if it comes from China, but a lot of it does. And it says not for human consumption. And people still just take it.
Yeah.
You're just like, what is it? You get lots of weirder calls, right? How long you been doing the job and how weird have the calls been getting?
Oh, I'm coming up on 20 years. Yeah, there's some strange ones. You know, people ask me this all the time, and I try to think of some ones, and as soon as we get off the phone, then I'm going to have like 900.
That's how it always works.
Yeah, it's people's calls for the strangest shit, you know. I went to an owl in a basketball hoop the other day, overflowing toilet, a lot of cats in the trees. Birds in a tree. That's always a good one.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, like a lot of the calls are just BS, right?
A lot of them, yeah. Every now and then, you know, you get some legit emergencies,
right?
Yeah, just a bunch of a bird in a tree. I'm like, well, where the hell are they supposed to be? It turned out to be a parrot, you know, somebody's pet, but still, I don't.
Yeah, they got to be a little bit more specific with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
If we wanted to knock out Saddam Hussein, we could have just like, you know, CIA get some fentanyl in his orange juice or whatever. You know what I mean?
That's what. If you guys follow Scott Adams, Scott Adams always talks about that. Like a very small amount of fentanyl in the water supply, like it's over, right? Sure. And yeah, they talk about that, and it's boy, this took on a cheerful.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
I think there's a famous. The British did that to the Chinese. Was it the 19th century?
Yes, they did.
Have you heard about this? They fought a couple wars, and there's the famous. A lot cheaper than bringing all the soldiers in. They like introduced heroin.
Yeah, it was. Oh yeah.
And like, you know, the famous, like there's some dispatch from some British general. He's like, China is asleep. Or, you know what I mean? Like that really cut down on some of the political unrest. You just have half the people walking around in a druggy haze. And a certain level, I guess that's the beneficial side of drugs, maybe.
Yeah.
It keeps a few people from joining neo-Nazi groups or Antifa groups, maybe. I don't know.
There's 2 countries on earth where there are no laws against the distribution, growth, consumption of cannabis. And one is Uruguay and the second is North Korea. Now, why do you think North Korea wants everybody high? Because, I mean, if you stop to think about it, you're in North Korea, right? And that really gets up in your head. So, yeah, you're right. They've been using drugs to get the populace. Now, obviously, if you're going to pick a drug, that one's probably the tamest.
Right.
But yeah, you just, it's trippy once you get into it.
Yeah. Right on. Well, thank you, Alex. This program, your Master Small Stakes Cash Game in One Class, you've got it on special now for 2 weeks, just for our listeners. It's going to be on sale until February 21st. Normally it's $800 if I'm not mistaken, and we're slashing it 75% for our listeners down to $200, right?
Yes, sir.
Right on. Awesome. And we still have, for another 2 weeks, we've got Master Tournament Poker in One Class. Basically the same principle as your cash game, but your cash game is about 3 or 4 times as much content. Just an awesome, awesome program. I've gone through the tournament program probably 3 or 4 times. Really good. Going to go through it again before this WSOP. And your cash game program was spot on as well. So Thank you, man. You can click on the link in the show notes. It'll take you straight there, and use our code like we use for everything else, HU Poker, to see that discount. Just enter it in and click down, and yeah, you'll like it a lot. It's a great program, just like everything you put out, Alex. So keep up the good work, man.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And for everybody listening, click on the button, I want this, and then it'll give you a section where you put the promo code. And then, yeah, just enter it there and it'll change the price. But that's where you should be entering it. And yeah, totally happy to be on here. This was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. And don't forget your free 3-hour training pack. I'm going to go over that tonight. I'm excited about it. I haven't seen that one yet. So that is exciting. But yeah, thank you for coming on the show, Alex. And thanks for coming on, Mikey. And you guys got anything else? If not, then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, that's about it, I think. Alex, we're going to see you in Vegas, or is it main event only?
Yeah, I'll be at the main event, hopefully a little bit more, but we'll see. And go to pokerheadrush.com, everybody, if you want to sign up for the newsletter, and that'll give you the free pack as well. If you go there, the welcome email will give it to you.
Right on. Good deal. Good deal. Yeah, I'm on your newsletter. I love those things. You know, you get 5 to 15 minutes worth of content every day on something new. It's good. Keep it up.
Thank you, sir.
Right
Will
on.
do.
And thank you for tuning in. Here is your weekly motivational speech.
It is not the things we do in life that we regret on our deathbed. It is the things we do not. We don't beat the reaper by living longer. We beat the reaper by living well and living fully. For the reaper will come for all of us. The question is, what do we do between the time we're born and the time he shows up?
You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. Because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-worn path. And that will make all the difference.
And you will need to find your passion. Many of you have already done it. Many of you will later. Many of you may take till your 30s or 40s. But don't give up on finding it, right? Because then all you're doing is waiting for the